Welcome to our first edition of 2026 InSession Live. Thanks for your patience in navigating last week with me. Was going through a bit of a family emergency last Friday. So I appreciate your patience in waiting until this week. We do have a bit of information to catch up on and hope that you'll find this information helpful and valuable. This is InSession Live. We're going to jump right in and make good use of our time. But before we do, just want to remind you to please use the Q&A question and answer box. Should any questions pop up, we'd appreciate that. Okay, just a bit of an overview about how we're going to spend our time together today. We are going to share some information, just generally focus on what we know so far about the tone of the legislative session. We're going to highlight what we've been doing for the past 2 weeks. We will never have enough time for a full update on every single bill that's been introduced or heard. But we've got a nice summary ready for you. We've got a couple bills that we're going to share that we think is important for you to be looking at and unpacking with your district teams and colleagues as we think about what's coming up next week. Cynthia will share a little bit about some of the resources that we have to support you, and then we'll just run through sort of an action items list before we wrap up. Want to start with just a quick introduction to who WSSDA's advocacy team is. For those of you that this is your first advocacy update that you're tuning into this year, we do have a new team, which we love. We're very excited about. I think many of you know me, but if you don't, I'm Logan Noel Andrus. I'm your Director of Strategic Advocacy, recycled WSSDA employee, been back in the job for I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 months now. I came back last spring. Cynthia, you want to introduce yourself to the team?
Yes, hello everyone. Cynthia Tamayo. I am the new legislative policy specialist. I've been with WASDA for now almost 5 months. Before this, I've had experience in state government work. I've done higher ed. I've worked for the Commission on Hispanic Affairs, doing operations and policy. So really excited to be here.
Great, thanks. And Daniel, you want to jump in on behalf of you and Kyla?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I am one half of your strategic advocacy consultants. So we are your contract lobbyists and help Logan and Cynthia with all things here at the state legislature. And I'm in my car, but I promise I'm not driving, just here.
Thanks, Daniel. Just wanted to make sure that you all know who is representing WSSDA's advocacy with legislators. In addition to the 4 pictures that you see on the screen here, we also get a ton of back-end data and analysis help from Daniel Lunghofer, who many of you know on WSSDA staff. He is a beautiful support to all of our work, along with Sean Duke and Robbie McClellan on our communications team. They help to make us look really good. So we are appreciative of them, as well as all of the members of the WSSDA Legislative Committee that we are talking to every single week during the session to get perspective on a number of bills. So anyway, just want you all to know that there's a team of folks representing, and we are all here to be a resource to you as you are navigating the session, as you have questions about bills or about what this thing might do or that thing might do. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are absolutely available for any kind of one-on-one support, questions, coaching that might be helpful to you. In particular, you'll see mine and Cynthia's email addresses and phone numbers on the screen. Feel free to take those down. Those are also cell phone numbers, so don't hesitate to send us a text too if that's easier for you. If you ever need to get a hold of us in a pinch, a text message is probably the best way to do that. Okay, just a little bit of context as to what it's looking and feeling like right now in Olympia. The session started last Monday, January 12th, and this is a short session meaning that we will be active for 60 days with an end scheduled for March 12th. I do like that we're on the 12th of both months, makes it easy to remember. And there are a large number of bills that have been coming out in the education space. As of now, we're tracking over 120 new bills. That means bills that have just been introduced in 2026. That number does not include all of the bills that did not pass but may have been introduced last session that technically can still be tapped into at any time. So that is to say we are tracking a lot. And the other thing that I would emphasize in sharing that number is that we're also tracking a pretty significant number of unfunded mandates. What that means is those are bills that would not be included with funding to come with those requirements to support you all. We are tracking and weighing in on those accordingly. Generally, I can also say, as I think you've heard our association say for a while, budget issues are dominating everything in the state legislature this session. We know that our legislators are in a really hard place in terms of navigating a significant budget deficit, and they'll be proposing lots of different ideas in terms of how to fill that, to include a budget that we've already seen from Governor Ferguson that includes some proposed cuts. As well as we are also anticipating multiple options presented on the table later this session in terms of revenue proposals. As it relates to the beginning of session, one of sort of the pomp and circumstance activities that happens, the governor hosts a state of the state, basically his general update to kick off the legislative session. And you can see what some of his priorities were during that speech, to include transportation, housing, and early learning. I share that just to sort of emphasize that public education, K through 12 education, were not listed there as a priority for the governor's office, just signaling that our sector and pretty much every other sector has a pretty tough road ahead of us this session in terms of achieving any of our offensive outcomes. Daniel, I would ask you and Cynthia as well if there's any other just general context that you think would be helpful for our members to know based on your perspectives.
Yeah, happy to add one thing, Logan. I was meeting with a senator today from the majority party in the Senate, so the Democratic Party, and he made it clear that while we are facing budget issues right now and budget constraints, that these will not end in 2 years. This is going to be quite a long road of budget issues. So 4, 6 years, depending on revenue, depending on cuts, depending on all things taxes. But I just want to kind of paint that as this is one step towards solving the budget hole. Last year was the first step. This is the second step, but there'll be additional steps in the next couple of years. So we are definitely not out of the woods yet. So just wish I could be bringing happy things, but that is unfortunately what I'm hearing from folks in the Senate.
Thanks, Daniel. Cynthia, anything else that you'd add based on our first couple weeks? Okay. All right. Wanted to also just remind you that WSSDA has a couple of anchoring and supporting documents that are really foundational to the work that we are prioritizing this session. First and foremost is definitely our WSSDA legislative priorities. You have seen those in a number of settings at this point, generally focused on advocacy to ensure that school districts can fulfill their legal and moral obligations. Advocacy around relief and flexibility for school districts, really trying to make sure that there's solid messaging being sent to our legislators to say we cannot pass any more unfunded mandates. And we're looking for flexibility around existing mandates, especially while basic education remains underfunded across our state. And then finally, we've got a section of work around the capital budget and helping to advance funding for safe, healthy, and contemporary school facilities. The capital budget is not necessarily in or facing the same revenue constraints that the operating budget is facing. What that means is that as we think about some of our facilities and capital related priorities, those are areas where we're absolutely anticipating investments being made by the legislature. We'll get into that talking about the governor's budgets here in a bit. Additionally, many of you attended the legislative conference the weekend prior to the start of session that we host in partnership with WASA, the Superintendent's Association, and WASBO, the School Business Officials Association. Our three organizations have collectively identified three hot topics, all of which are directly connected to our WASDA legislative priorities. So we're sort of using that advocacy to guide our work. And then additionally, WASDA is one member of what's called the School Funding Coalition, which is comprised of 8 statewide education associations that's really working to ensure that our K through 12 funding formula has what it needs to fund student needs across our state. So each of those 3 documents are guiding for us as we are doing our work this session. Check out our InSession written update coming later today for links if you need to refresh yourself on everything that these documents say, but just wanted to sort of start with that grounding. Okay, some high-level points as to what we've been navigating in the first couple of weeks. Not on the slide, but just I think really important to emphasize the education sector has a lot of bills. And I think that there are more K through 12 bills that would specifically impact school districts than there are in any other sectors right now. So the sheer volume of bills that are being introduced and getting public hearings is just really, really, really intense right now. Again, with a number of those bills not including funding to support any additional requirements. Just a couple of areas that I think we want to highlight. First and foremost, during the first week of the legislative session, the governor's proposed budgets had public hearings. Again, he has an operating budget. That's where we're seeing a lot of the revenue issues, and then also a capital budget. And on the operating budget, you can see the bill numbers on the screen here, 2289 and 5998. WASDA weighed in opposition to the operating budget, specifically calling attention to the fact that none of our K through 12 education priorities received funding there, and calling out a couple of particular budget cuts that have been 25% enrollment cut to transition to kindergarten programming, as well as cuts to local effort assistance. On the capital budget side, we did see funding included for the Small School Modernization Grant Program. We're particularly grateful for that. We saw $74 million included there to include full funding for all of the proposed planning grants that have been submitted. And I believe it's the first 12 project grants that are on that list. So we were glad to see funding for that program and others related to school facilities. Additionally, a number of our priority bills were heard specifically in the Senate. During the first week of session, the Transportation Safety Net bill was heard, that Senate Bill 5858. That bill would reinstate the Transportation Safety Net program that was cut during the last legislative session to include funding to be used to support districts in transporting special populations, to include students in special education, students in foster care, and students experiencing homelessness. Additionally, the MSOC bill was heard. I want to say that was just yesterday or the day before. Maybe it was Wednesday. That's the Material Supplies and Operating Costs Bill, Senate Bill 5918. That was heard in the Senate Education Committee. We had a large showing of school districts, advocates, and others really, really there to support that bill, and we're very appreciative of that. We also saw many of you in the sign-in list signing in to support that bill. So we appreciate that advocacy there. Also, again, just want to emphasize the large number of unfunded mandates that have been proposed. Our list as of now has 20 plus bills that have been introduced across the House and Senate. We need your help to share costs and administrative burdens with your legislators. If you read InSession, the written update that'll be coming out this afternoon, we'll be happy to share that list as we have it at this point in time, so that you can see those bills and really begin to unpack them and start gathering some of those fiscal and budget calculations with your school districts. Finally, I would just emphasize that a number of school director related bills have been heard in the past couple of weeks. Senate Bill 5860 in particular is a bill that touches on school board compensation and required training. These bills would increase the cap by which school board compensation sits right now from $50 a day to $100 a day. And then it would impact that annual cap. Currently sits at $4,800 a year, and it would bump that up to $13,750 a year. That cap, it's not required. School board members would not be required to be compensated, but there is no state funding included with that proposal. It would all have to be funded by local school districts. Additionally, that bill would add a training requirement to school directors around funding and finance, to include essentially a one-time training that school board members would have to take within their first year elected to the school board. WSSDA's position on that bill has been other. Also, in the House and Senate, there have been companion bills that were heard in both committees this last week around requiring school director election districts. Essentially requiring school districts with 3,000 or more students to not have all of their school directors elected in an at-large manner. We can break the bill down for you in InSession, the written update later today, but it essentially requires some of our smaller to medium-sized school districts to have at least 3 members elected by director district, and for some of our larger school districts, at least 4 of their school directors elected by district. So just wanted to let you know there are bills moving through the legislative process that directly impact you all as school directors. None of these bills have been exec from their policy committee yet, with the exception of Senate Bill 5860. That is the compensation and training bill that was passed out of the Senate Education Committee earlier this week. All right, we are going to pull out just a couple of highlights in terms of what we can anticipate for week 3. Just checking the Q&A box. Remember, if you have questions for us, please don't hesitate to drop those in. We'll be happy to answer anything that you might need to know. So as we look ahead to next week, we have at least 10 right now public hearings that we will be attending to track and engage on education bills. Those are sort of scattered throughout the week. There are sort of a flurry of bills that we'll be looking at the beginning of the week on Monday and Tuesday in particular. We're going to get into some of those here in a minute. Also next week on Thursday, January 29th, as an extension of our legislative conference, we'll be working with WSSDA and WSBO to host our Public Education Advocacy Day. That's next Thursday, January 29th. We will pop in and show you what we're thinking that day will look like here in a bit. And then also just flagging that our Federal Relations Network is getting ready for a DC advocacy trip. And there are a number of folks representing the WSSDA board and a couple staff members, as well as a number of school districts from around the state that will be traveling out to DC. Folks will be leaving next weekend. So just wanted to sort of share that as a summary. And we're going to move into just a couple of bills that we think you should be aware of. The first one is House Bill 2551, and this is about Maining District financial solvency. And this is a Representative Jake Fay bill out of the 27th Legislative District, that's Tacoma. I'm not sure exactly what our position will be on that yet, but based on feedback that we've received from the Legislative Committee, it is possible that we will oppose this bill. What it does, it would essentially allow school districts with an estimated fund balance of 3% or less, based on their total revenues from that fiscal year, to request to sell property to alleviate financial burden. Those requests would have to be sent through OSPI. And the bill indicates a number of expectations as to sort of what would allow OSPI to say yes or no to said request. And it would also clarify expectations as to what some of those fund balance resources may be able to be spent on. It would also add monthly reporting requirements for school districts to include a requirement for you all to report on a monthly basis your district's expenditures, revenue, cash balances, and loan activity. What we heard from members of the legislative committee last night is definitely some concerns around the administrative aspects to the monthly reporting that would be included here, as well as a general sentiment saying, we appreciate a path forward towards the opportunity to review and reallocate funds as school districts are experiencing low fund balances and don't know that we want to set the precedent of selling property as a way to be able to fix that. Instead, the answer is let's fully fund public education and fix the prototypical school model. If you all have thoughts or feedback on that bill, would absolutely appreciate you submitting that and submitting any questions that you might have into the Q&A, as well as reaching out to us via email if there's any additional things you'd like us to consider there. Would encourage you to take a look at this bill with your school district team. This one has a hearing on Monday afternoon at 1:30 next week in the House Education Committee. Additionally, next week, House Bill 2593 has a hearing. This is in the same Monday at 1:30 time slot in the House Education Committee. And this is a bill that would add minimum and maximum fund balance requirements to school districts. This bill is sponsored by Representative Rood and Callan and requested formally by OSPI. Our position would be to oppose this bill. This bill would require minimum and maximum fund balance for school districts to essentially say no less than 6% and no more than 12% for any school district with more than 2,000 students, and no less than 8% and no more than 34% for school districts with 2,000 or less students. Similar to the last bill, there's also some clarifications included here as to how school districts can spend their fund balance resources. So, oops, sorry about that. So we are absolutely opposing this bill. We have heard from school districts that would not be able to reach the minimum threshold in some cases, as well as been hearing from school districts that may have more than the maximum. So we're hearing from folks on both sides. This bill very clearly and directly would remove local flexibility that you all need to be able to determine your own budgets. So we will be testifying in opposition to that bill next week. Going to ask Daniel to jump in and talk a little bit about House Bill 1960.
Great. Let me make sure I'm on camera. Okay, good. Okay, great. House Bill 1960 is Representative Alex Rammel, who represents the 40th district, which includes parts of Skagit, Whatcom counties, and then all of San Juan counties as well. So what the bill would do, and it's pretty different than last year, there's been multiple iterations, is for new qualified renewable energy projects, facilities, so wind farms, solar farms, biomass facilities, there would be essentially no property tax on the things that they're building. So the wind turbines, the solar panels. And instead, there would be a specific excise tax that would be replaced that in theory is meant to replace the property tax that both the state, the county, and all junior taxing districts, such as school districts, would receive from the fund. It would be distributed as local taxes are. I think the thing here that I want to highlight is there is kind of two areas of impact that we're tracking closely. One is on levies. So because this is new projects moving forward, We do not expect, and it's written in such a way it should not affect current levy amounts. Those should all be the same. However, there is the potential for impacts on new levies for folks that are going after property tax levies upcoming, because it would be decreasing the amount of property tax that could potentially be in a district to be taxed. There is some language in one of the versions of the bills to make essentially junior taxing districts like school districts whole. So there could be additional funds. If you were to raise your property tax, you would get additional excise tax. However, there's been a lot of negotiations around that, so we're looking into that closely. The other area that's really interesting for this bill is on LEA funding, because LEA is calculated based on property tax. Exempting some of these projects from that would allow for certain school districts that could have gotten bumped down or bumped out of LEA to maintain LEA funding, which should be fantastic. I think the thing here to note is that these are for only specific projects. So I live in Olympia. If I put solar panels on my home, it would not affect the Olympia School District. This would only apply to new large scale projects. So this is something that we are tracking closely. It's a pretty complicated tax bill, and there's also some potential positives and some potential drawbacks. So we are still working on that, and I will pass it over to Logan to talk about other things from there.
Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate it. If you are a school district, we are anticipating most specifically that this will impact Central and Eastern Washington. If you think a bill like this could impact your school district, either positively or negatively, we would really appreciate hearing from you in terms of what that looks like, and in terms of if you think this bill is a good idea or not. We don't have enough information at this point to have a specific position on this bill, and we really need to hear from school districts as to what the impacts will be. So please read InSession this afternoon for additional information on this bill, and again, would really appreciate hearing from you all. As it relates to unfunded mandates, there are a number of bills that have hearings this upcoming week that would be included on this list. We're not going to walk through every single one of them, but did want to sort of get this list in front of you. I will just add a caveat that this is potentially non-exhaustive, as bills may be added to public hearing schedules throughout the week. This is just what we are tracking as of right now. And you can see at the end of each bill line what day each of these bills has a public hearing. So we've got a couple on Tuesday talking about voter registration day and online records for special education complaint decisions. On Wednesday, we've got a bill requiring cardiac emergency response plans in schools. And on Thursday, we've got a couple bills about cursive signature education and instruction and intervention in reading and math. Again, by listing these out here, this is no comment necessarily in terms of the specific merit of any of these ideas. This is purely just a list of things that we've seen that do not include funding along with the requirements in them. So wanted to flag that for you, again, for you to take back to your district and try to think about what costs or administrative activities you all will have to navigate with these bills without additional funding. Okay, one more thing for me, I think, as it relates to next week. Just want to dive in and highlight our plans for Public Education Advocacy Day. We really hope a number of you are planning to join us next Thursday in Olympia. So just a quick overview, we are planning to kick off the day with a rally on the Capitol steps that morning between 8:30 and 9:30. And then essentially during the morning time of the 29th, there are a number of optional activities that you might or might not choose to engage in. We recommend using the morning hours for any individual meetings that you might be planning with your legislators. And again, that is on each individual school district to sort of organize and make those happen. Additionally, if you have time in between or aren't able to get meetings on the calendar with your legislators during those times, both of the education committees in the House and Senate are meeting that day. From 8 to 10, the House Education Committee is meeting, and then from 10:30 to 12:30, the Senate Early Learning and K through 12 Education Committee is meeting. So some opportunities there for you all to get into some public hearings. And we know that both of those scheduled timeframes do have public hearings on bills. So there's some opportunities there. Additionally, other things you can do on campus, you can walk up at the beginning of every hour to the information desk inside the Capitol building and get a Capitol tour. You also might spot Cynthia and I or Daniel just around campus that day. So we are all absolutely around to help you navigate in any way that you need. Some of the activities that we will be hosting will be focused in the afternoon. From 2 to 2:45, we'll be hosting a sort of session where all the folks that are there can come together for connections and learning, essentially sharing and debriefing what you all may have heard from your legislators that morning and having the opportunity to connect with school districts. And then from 3 to 3:45, we'll have a number of legislators that will come join us to do some Q&A. During this whole entire day, we have the room, it's in the Newhouse building, room 140, that we have as sort of our home base for the day. So if you need a place to come hang out and sit down, or just a quiet space to work and think or talk with your colleagues, we have that space for the day. That is also the same room that will be hosting the 2 and 3 o'clock sessions. Finally, if any of you are going to be evening people on Capitol campus that day, both of the budget committees have public hearings that afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. It's the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Ways and Means Committee. Again, both of those spaces will have public hearings, so opportunities to take a look at their schedule. I don't know off the top of my head if either of those committees will hear education bills this week, but we'll be happy to include information on that in InSession later today. Cynthia, you want to jump in and talk about some resources?
Yeah, thanks, Logan. I'm going to share my screen and go over some of the resources. So let me go ahead and just do that. Let me know if you can see my screen here.
We can see
Okay,
it.
perfect. So a couple things I'll go through is our Bill Watch. So if you go to our WSSDA website and Advocacy and click on Bill Watch, you'll be able to see what bills we are tracking for this session. And as Logan mentioned, there is many dropping every week, and we are both going in and adding them to this list. And so you'll have the bill number, the last time it's been updated, the status of the bill. So we see some are already on their way to the Ways and Means Committee, the positions, and as you'll see, some are blank. We are still in the works to adding positions to bills. You'll also see the sponsors. And there is a new column that has categories. So these categories, if you click on this drop down button, it'll be able to tell you, like, for example, facilities and construction, funding and finance. If you're like, there's so many bills on this list, I just want to see funding and finance, you can click on that category and those will pop up for you. We also have a short description, so 1 to 2 sentences about what the bill is about. So if you have time, I highly recommend going through and just looking through and seeing which bills are standing out to you. And like I mentioned, these are always getting updated every week or even every day as bills are getting dropped. The other thing that I'll just talk about is the advocacy calendar that we have. So as you can see, we're, coming up on week 3 here. And so if you're going through this, this is just a great sheet to go through. So as we enter week 3, you'll see joining WASA, WASDA, and WASPO and Olympia, continue to monitor committee hearings, signing in, emailing your written testimony or testifying either in person or virtual. And so this is just a great like cheat sheet where you could go through and check things off for the week. This will also be sent in through the InSession later today. The other thing to also talk about is the session dates. So these are our cutoff calendar dates. So as you can see, we are also going to be approaching policy committee cutoff on February 4th. Since it's a shorter session, it's just going to be moving very quickly. And so we have February 9th will also be fiscal committee cutoff. So I would just take a peek at each of these calendar dates and just see like what you'll need to do beforehand. And also notice like what bills have been passing through or which ones have already died. So when you get a chance, I would look through these dates. We also have, let me just make sure there's no questions. Okay. Um, TVW. So TVW is so great because if you are not in Olympia, TVW will also always have live committee hearings about what's going on at the Capitol. You'll also be able to see the schedule. So if you're like, oh, next week this looks like this hearing is going to happen in the House Education, you can see when it's scheduled for, and you can always pop on. So TVW is a great tool. And then the last thing I'll just touch on real quick is the ledge.wall.gov website. So this is just a great link to always have on. Let me ledge.wall. So I'm just going to start from the beginning. So as you go through this website, you're going to be able to see what bill you want to find. So I was on 2007. And this will give you just, you'll be able to see the title, the sponsors, the companion bill number. This also gives you the roadmap of where the bill is going to be, if it's moving in committee, if it's on the floor calendar. But I wanted to show this website to some folks who are wanting to testify. So on the right-hand side, you'll be able to send a comment to your legislators or sign up to testify. So I'm just going to click on this. You'll just want to make sure that you're clicking on the right one. You'll want to select like how you would like to testify, if you'd like to send in a written testimony, or if you will be there in person, or if this will be virtual. And so this is just a great way to go in and register to testify. And so if you keep scrolling down, it'll also give you information about your Zoom link, all the additional information. And so I just wanted to go through because I know there's been some questions about how to testify. And again, Logan and I are always here to help if you need some help with navigating the ledge.wall.gov website. And I'll pass it to Logan.
Thanks, Cynthia. That was lovely, and hopefully for all of you helpful in terms of seeing some additional resources. Again, wanting to make sure that you have everything you need to access and participate in the legislative process. Okay, we are going to pop back to our slide deck and just have a couple more things to share before we wrap up today. There we are. Wanted to flag for you to know for yourself and to share with fellow board members that we have launched the Advocacy Action Network this month at WSSDA. For those of you that have been around for a while, this is essentially a revamp and a little bit of a rebranding from the Legislative Representative Network, really wanting to make clear that we are absolutely here and willing to support any legislatively interested school directors with skill building and connections. So if this sounds like something that is interesting to you, this group does meet on a monthly basis on Zoom. We are continuing to meet during the legislative session. You can sign up to get that Zoom link by sending us an email at strategicadvocacy@wasda.org. And just want to highlight on that note that our next meeting is February 10th in just a couple short weeks at noon. And during that hour, we'll be focused specifically on testimony preparation and training. We heard from the Advocacy Action Network this month that testimony can be an intimidating process. Cynthia and I would agree with you. And we heard that we need to spend some time just thinking through how we can best help you to prepare for testimony, what kinds of data and talking points could be the most helpful, what are sort of the rules of the road in terms of process and procedure of testimony. So we will be spending some time digging into that during our next network meeting on February 10th. So hope to see many of you there. And in closing, just want to highlight a couple of action items for you as you think about the week ahead. You've heard us say it a number of times, but please be sure to check out WSSDA InSession that'll be coming out this afternoon. We'll be providing links and some additional resources and information based on everything that we've talked about here today, just in another version. You can share that around. Additionally, please be thinking about the number of unfunded mandates that are being proposed and heard throughout the legislative session. We will include that list in session coming out later today. And just really important to think about what some of those financial impacts will be in your districts, and then actually share those with your legislators. And then finally, just consider attending and scheduling meetings with your legislators. Our WSDA, WASA, and WASBO Advocacy Day this next Thursday. Okay, before we wrap, I'm just going to revisit the Q&A box. I see a question. If a bill has been introduced but no hearing has been scheduled, do you judge its viability based on the number of sponsors, or is it probably dead for this session? Really good question. I think at this point, the closer we get to our policy cutoff date, the better it is to assume that that bill will not get a hearing. I think the number of legislators that have sponsored is definitely a good indicator to sort of have a sense of like, do we think that bill will get a hearing or not? But it's hard to know at this point. What I can say is the schedule for the following week of legislative session comes out every Wednesday evening. So we will know in just a couple days, next Wednesday, essentially everything that'll be on the public hearing calendar through that February 4th cutoff. And again, that February 4th cutoff is a self-imposed deadline by the legislature, basically saying any bill that has not received a public hearing in its initial policy committee and been passed out of that committee, it would be dead as of February 4th. That's about a week and a half from now. I see some other questions. How can we find the bill tracker on WSDA website? You can essentially go to our advocacy tab at the top of just wasda.org, and you'll find a page called Legislative Resources or Legislative Updates. The bill tracker is listed there. Cynthia also might be sharing the link directly with you as well. I see her typing some.
Yes.
Perfect. What time is the Advocacy Action Network meeting? Is it recorded? Thanks for making us go back to that. That meeting will be from 12 to 1 p.m. on February 10th, and that meeting is recorded. We record and send those out to our network distribution list every single month. And again, if you want to get on that list, please send us an email, strategicadvocacy@wasda.org. We'll be happy to add you. And last question we have is, what's the best way to advocate against cuts in the governor's budget? At this point in time, I would say it's really important to try to find some specific numbers and data as to how some of those cuts might impact your district. For example, the 25% enrollment cut to transition to kindergarten is being proposed by the governor. What would that mean for your district? Both sort of numbers and data wise, as well as sort of community impact and story wise. So start gathering that information around some of the cuts that are included. And then I think it's good to send that information to your legislator, as well as members of the Appropriations Committee and the Ways and Means Committee of the legislature. We do maintain an email distribution list of legislators across the state. And that list also includes some of the specific committees broken out to include both the Appropriations and Ways and Means Committee. So if something like that would be helpful for you to receive, again, please send us an email, strategicadvocacy@wasda.org, and we'll be happy to share that data with you. Cynthia, I think we've made our way through the questions. If you have any others, please don't hesitate to contact us. Just sort of want to end with a quote. A good head and a good heart are always a formidable combination. We have some really tough work ahead of us this session, and really appreciate you for continuing to show up and engage and elevate the needs of your district and your community, because we got a lot of work ahead of us. So thank you for being here today. Hope you have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend. Cynthia and I are here to help in any way that you need, and we'll see you next Friday. Thanks, everyone.